For those of you who are joining us, hello again, welcome to church. My name is David Oakley, Senior Pastor of Westroad and Wesley Community Church, and I'm delighted you're joining us on this series called You Are Not Alone. As we think particularly today about navigating the storms of life in this series, we're just trying to bring encouragement, we're trying to bring hope, and saying you're not left isolated. Because at times, when we think about what's going on with COVID, with the restrictions, with the isolation, with some the workload, we feel as though we are alone. We feel, does anybody care? Does God care? Does God notice? Is he even vaguely interested in me? Or is he too busy trying to sort other things out? The powerful message we want to give is you are not alone in these days. It's interesting, the whole idea of a storm, isn't it? Because people have used that illustration, politicians and some of our leaders have used that, we're all in the same storm together, we're in the same boat together. And I get it about the storm, but I don't think we are in the same boat, to be honest. I think we've all got different boats. Some boats are very busy, some boats are full, some boats are empty, some boats are struggling, some boats seem to be cruising. But we are in this storm, and other commentators have said this storm is more like a blizzard that's leading to an ice age. The knock-on effects of COVID, the coldness, the isolation it brings, and then the ongoing effects for months and maybe years to come as we think of the economy, employment, health, mental health, relationships. Difficult times. So we need to know somebody is with us, and that's what we want to talk about today. We're using the headings from Max Lucado's book of the same title, You're Not Alone, and we're using that as an inspiration in order to help us think through about this idea that we have Jesus with us in our life, even in the storms of life. So that's my main point today. You and I need to trust that Jesus is right here with us. You and I need to trust that Jesus is in the boat with us, no matter what we face, what we go through. And if he's not in the boat with us, I want to encourage you. You need to invite him into your situation. You need to want him to get involved wherever your life is. Because life without Jesus in a storm can be dark, it can be disorientating, and it can be diversionary. It can feel very bleak and black out there. Or it can be just feel, you don't know where you're going, disorientated. You've got no sense of where things are going. Or you can get distracted and diverted into weird and wonderful ways. This is why Jesus is our anchor in a storm. As the ancient hymn says, he's an anchor that holds, an anchor that can grip us. And we need to believe and hold on to that in these difficult days. And so, as we unpack this idea of Jesus being with us in the storm to prevent the darkness, to prevent the disorientation, to prevent the diversions, we're going to turn back to an eyewitness account written a number of decades after the life of Jesus. And it was written by his very best friend, John, who hung out with Jesus towards the end of his life for a number of years, and he writes a very reflective eyewitness account. And he writes it with a purpose that people wouldn't believe that Jesus was a good guy, or Jesus was a magician, or a great teacher. John wrote this book in order to say Jesus equals God. Jesus is God. And this is his message to us as he writes this, as he picks a number of miracles, a number of signs, some blocks of teaching, some records about some of his actions. And today we're going to jump in John chapter 6. So if you have got your Bibles, perhaps you want to turn to them, or you can follow the PowerPoint slides as we go along with the text up there. But in John chapter 6, we see Jesus showing real evidence he's God. He's been working now for a number of months in particular. He's focusing on some of the great teaching and also impacting people through his miracles and his signs, and the crowds are getting bigger and bigger. He has become Mr. Popular. They're all following him and chasing him and pursuing him. And at the beginning of John chapter 6, we see there's over 5,000 people going hungry. And Jesus steps into that situation with a few fish and loaves and ends up feeding them, thousands of people, this great miracle sign of the Messiah, the sent one of God. And people are getting pretty excited about him. So this is where we're going to jump into the passage we're going to look at today to see that Jesus can be trusted in the storm. So let's turn to John 6, verse 15, the response following the feeding of over 5,000 people. We see Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So here in this verse, we see a storm of people, if you like, a storm of expectation. Jesus has done this amazing miracle, and the crowds are pressing in there saying, Jesus, we're going to make you our king. Crazy decision, because it wasn't Jesus' agenda, it wasn't Jesus' schedule, it wasn't Jesus' time, and it wasn't Jesus' idea. So Jesus, in a way, runs away, he withdraws, he pulls back. He goes back into the mountains to avoid this pressure from the crowds. The storm and pressure of people causes Jesus to withdraw. I don't know about you, but do you have that runaway place, when the pressures of people come upon you, when it becomes too much? Have you got a place to run to and hide and retreat? For a few people, it's a shed at the bottom of the garden, or it might be gardening itself, or going for walks in the country, or wherever. It's good sometimes to have a place to retreat to, just to get our sanity back and get a sense of focus back. And this is what Jesus did as the darkness of the pressures of people began to press in on him. Jesus also encouraged his disciples to get away from the crowds as well, as we read in verses 16 and 17. When evening came, the disciples of Jesus went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. In some of the other accounts about this incident, we see it's Jesus giving the instruction. Disciples, followers of me, get across the lake, go from the east to the west side, and I'll see you over there. And so the disciples head off. Perhaps Jesus didn't want them tainted or polluted by the thinking of the crowd. We're unsure, or maybe they were meant to go and prepare something ahead of Jesus, but either way, they're sent off across the lake. Now, for the disciples, this is no big deal. This is the Sea of Galilee. It's a lake that's probably about 8 miles by 13 miles. It was a lake many of them regularly fished upon, and often fished at night. So they were used to this. This was their home place. And so the prospect of going across a lake at night was no big deal for them, despite the darkness and despite Jesus apparently not being with them. But very quickly we see they start to run into some trouble. A strong wind blew, says verse 18, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. A strong wind whipped up. I don't know if you know much about the Sea of Galilee, but it's actually almost in a saucer shape. It's like 200 meters below sea level. So to the west, you've got the mountains and the hills, and as the wind's coming off the west, they suddenly plunge down off those mountains and hit the Sea of Galilee in this dip, in this saucer-like dip. So the disciples are trying to row from east to west, and so they're just rowing straight into this storm. And it says here they've progressed probably halfway across the lake, 3 or 4 miles. But according to some of the other accounts, they've probably been rowing for about 6 hours. Now, I'm no Olympic oarsman, but I tell you something, that is hard going. Rowing for hours and hours, and yet only progressing 3 or 4 miles, only getting halfway across. So at this point, the disciples are incredibly frustrated. They're here. They're doing what Jesus told them to. They're obeying what Jesus told them. They're right at the center of God's will, yet they're in the middle of a storm, and life is hard, difficult, and frustrating. Can you empathize with that? Do you get that? Sometimes we can say, yeah, I'm just doing what Jesus told me. I'm just doing what the Bible tells me. I'm just carrying out the will and the purposes and the plans of God, but it's frustrating, it's hard, and everything seems to be coming against me. This is what these followers of Jesus were facing at this point in time. But the transition from frustrating to becoming frightened happened not in the midst of the storm, not because of the difficulties of the storm, but when they saw Jesus. That's what freaked them out. That's what terrified them on this account. Suddenly they could handle, the frustrations of Rome, but suddenly seeing Jesus in his supernatural power, his supernatural godly glory, that was too much for them. That's what made them scared. So this is just a time just to pause, I think. Some of us, we're quite happy with our frustrations. We're quite happy with just rowing the boat for Jesus. Yeah, we'll keep battling on, we'll keep going through. But the prospect of Jesus turning up in his glory and his power in supernatural capacity, that is what scares us. We can cope with the storms. We can row. We're used to this. We can do this. We're in control. But for some of us, The sight of Jesus wanting to break into our situation and make a difference. That's what frightens us. And of course, Jesus here interacts with supernatural power. Verse 20 we read, "But Jesus said to them, 'It is I. Don't be afraid.' Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading." Incredible interaction here. Jesus calms them by saying, "It is I, it's me." What's the answer when we're frightened? What's the answer when we're frustrated? It's the presence of Jesus. It's the presence of God in our situation. That is the answer. That is the support. That is, you're not alone. This is the mechanism that helps us cope and navigate through this stuff. And look at this wonderful response from the disciples. They didn't want to keep Jesus at a distance, saying, "Yeah, it might be you, Jesus, but hey, keep walking. Yeah, calm the storm, but keep walking." They say, "No, Jesus, come on, get in the boat with us. Get in the boat with us." And I love that reaction. Despite their fear, despite their frustration, they don't want to keep Jesus at arm's length. They say, "No, come on in. Come on in. Join us." There's wonderful willingness and invitation there. And what happens? Immediately, they're almost teleported to Capernaum, 3 or 4 miles away. No more rowing, no more frustrating, no more battling against the winds. The presence of Jesus is enough to see them to their destination. Immediately. So yeah, Jesus might want us to work hard, but he doesn't want us to do something that's futile and wasted. He wants to maximize the opportunity, and we become far more effective when Jesus is in the boat, when we've got a sense of the present presence of Jesus in our lives, when we're saying, "Jesus, I want you in this situation. I need you in this situation. Come and make a difference." Have you given Jesus that kind of invitation in this current storm of COVID or whatever you're going through? Have you said to him, "Jesus, no more arm's length. Come on, get in the boat. Please get in my boat. Get into my situation and take me home. Take me to the place you want me to be." Wow, how exciting is that? When life looks dark, when life looks bleak, when life looks grim, the possibility to invite God into our situation in his supernatural power to make a difference. This is what is available to us in the storm. The problem is there was only a few of the disciples. The crowds had been left behind, and they were very disorientated. Have you ever been disorientated? Maybe you've slept somewhere new or different, and you've woken up in the middle of the night and it's dark, and you're like, "Where am I? Where am I? Where am I?" Or perhaps you've been on a walk somewhere up some mountains. I know when I've walked in the Lake District or in the Brecon Beacons in Wales, when the clouds descend, it's so easy to get disorientated. Where am I? Where am I going? Where's the pathway? This is what happened to these crowds. It says in verse 22, "The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had entered it with his disciples, and they had gone away alone." So the crowds, these were the crowds who wanted to force Jesus to take on their agenda, had become very disorientated. They didn't know where Jesus was. They had no explanation. They knew one boat had left full of disciples, but not necessarily with Jesus. So they're just trying to work out what's going on. We read in verses 23 and 24. "Then some boats from Tiberias, which is the northwest part of the Sea of Galilee, landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus." So we see this disorientation here that the storm has caused. There was the human storm trying to force Jesus to conform to their agenda and their schedule. Then there was the physical storm that caused these people from Tiberias in their boats to take shelter on the eastern shore away from that westerly wind. And now they're wondering, where is Jesus? And fair play to these people. They're not giving up. They're searching for Jesus. They're giving it everything they've got. You know, those Tiberias people who came with their boats, right, we're jumping in your boats, we're going to Capernaum, see if we can find Jesus. I doubt there would have been enough boats for all the crowd to get across, as some would have had to make the long walk around half of that lake, many miles. But fair play to them, they're searching. They're looking for Jesus. They're trying to make sense of it all. Because life in a storm without Jesus can be disorientating, especially when we're trying to force our own agenda. In a storm, we need those fixed points. And that's why I'm delighted you're joining us today. This is, one of your fixed points in a week where you can reconnect with God and others despite lockdown. It's a fixed point. One thing we'll be doing in a few minutes is celebrating communion. It's one of our fixed points that we like to try and do weekly in our church, just to focus and center on Jesus and remind ourselves of what we have. Without these fixed points, without these anchors, life in a storm becomes disorientating. It causes pressure on our mental health and well-being. So can I encourage you, ask Jesus into your storm so you get that reorientation again and that reconnection. And lastly, life without Jesus in a storm can be diversionary. Do you like diversions? I hate diversions. It's so frustrating. For those of you who don't know, here in Bury St Edmunds, where West Road and Wesley Community Church is, we have one main road outside of Bury St Edmunds called the A14. It covers east to west, right across Suffolk and East Anglia. Now, if there is any breakdown or any issue in that road, then it just causes chaos, diversions, because it is the main road. And Wi-Fi isn't great here in Suffolk. I also remember my son, when we walked up Mount Snowdon in Wales, he said, "Unbelievably, Dad, the Wi-Fi signal's better at the top of Mount Snowdon than it is in Suffolk." So as you're trying to get your sat-nav, you're trying to get reorientated, you're trying to get back on track here, it can be difficult. I remember just before Christmas, with the football team I'm involved with, they play 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. We'd already had to drive over an hour away. We lost as well. So it's 10, 11 o'clock. You just want to get home. Then those flashing yellow lights come on. A14 blocked. Follow the diversion signs, which never really work, do they? So you end up going here, there, and everywhere. It took us ages getting home. It was so frustrating. And this is what can happen with a storm. We just get disorientated. We end up going in wrong places and wrong ways. And this is what's happened to the crowds here as we join them in verses 25 and 26. When they found Jesus on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate loaves and had your fill." So these crowds are asking Jesus a question. When? How did you get here? Jesus chose to ignore their questions, if you like, and answer a different question. Probably a good thing. Could you imagine the explanation? Jesus, when did you get here? Jesus, how did you get here? Well, I was up in the mountains, I was praying, saw a bit of a storm coming, saw my disciples on the lake, thought, oh, they need a bit of help. I think I'll just walk across that lake despite the storm. Then I jumped in the boat, teleported them to Capernaum. That's how I got here. Can you imagine trying to take that on board? So it's probably a good thing Jesus didn't answer that question. But the question he asks is more, why are you looking for me? I know you've made great efforts. I know some of you have walked around half a lake. I know some of you have jumped in boats and sailed it. But why are you really looking for me? Why do you want me, Jesus, in your life, even after a storm? This is the question he's asking, because Jesus is trying to pry at the motives here. And he has a suspicion. He said, you're not interested in the signs that show that I'm God. Actually, you're looking for another free meal. You're looking for that physical benefit. You're looking for me to become your king so you can overthrow the Roman oppressors at this time. You're looking for this kind of release. You're not interested in me. You're just looking for the stuff I can bring. If you like, Jesus suspects the crowds see him as a glorified vending machine. If they put the right money in and do the right thing, he'll come out with the right stuff they need. And Jesus wasn't having any of it. He said this in verse 27, do not work for the food that spoils, but work for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you, for on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval. Jesus said, look, there's got to be a shift in priorities here. At the moment, you're looking for another free food, free dinner, free food, free this. You're looking for release from your oppression and your difficulties. But actually, you need to think bigger than that. Because any storm is temporary. Any meal you get doesn't last forever. Like, I just had a huge Chinese banquet last night. My youngest son, Lewis, was 14 yesterday, so we had a Chinese takeaway, and I was full. But you know what? I want to eat again at the end of this service. I'm ready to go again. These things are temporary. And Jesus says, why are we spending so much time and effort on those things that are temporary, those things that don't last? Sure, we can see them, we can feel them, we can experience them, and they do bring some temporary benefit. But what about the eternal? What about your soul? What about those things that are going to last and count? Jesus said, that's why you need to connect with me. And he uses this expression, the Son of Man. He's trying to get rid of all military concepts here and said, no, I'm of God. I've got the approval of God. It talks about the seal of approval. When Jesus was baptized, a voice was heard from heaven saying, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. I love him. Listen to him. Jesus communicates God. Jesus is the representative of God. Jesus is God. He is enough. It is I. It's me. Is enough. The stuff is an add-on. Focus on him. Focus on being. This is what counts. And this is what Jesus emphasizes in our last couple of verses for today. Then they asked him, what must we do to do the works God requires? Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. So again, the people ask a question. What works must we do in order to get this eternal life? What stuff can we do? What's the religious formula here, Jesus? You're the vending machine. What coins do I put in? What religious practices do I need to do? Do I need to be good? Do I need to go to church? Do I need to listen to West Road and Wesley Community Church online? Do I need to say my prayers? Do I need to read my Bible? Do I need to do communion? What do I need to do? Just give me the formula, Jesus. We'll follow it and we'll get life and all the other stuff. Please note the answer that Jesus gives here. He doesn't say what works. He says what work you need to do. And actually, it's not a work at all, is it? It's trust me. That is the work Jesus has called you in the storm. Trust me. Trust that I'm with you. Trust that I can give you life. Believe and hang on and hold on to me and have faith in me to navigate through this. Not only in this life, but in the one to come. One for eternity, the one that's going to be everlasting. This is Jesus' response. This is the work. This is the response of the disciples when they said, Jesus, come in the boat. It's the trust. This is the work we do. It's not some kind of religious formula to follow. It's just asking God into our lives and believing he can make a difference. So in terms of action this week, what is God saying to you right now as we think about this passage we just looked at, as we think about the storms, as we think that we're not alone in this, as we think that life without Jesus is dark, it's disorientating, and it's diversionary? What is God saying to you in the midst of this? Are you trying to force an agenda on God? Are you frustrated with God at the moment? Are you unhappy at the speed of events? I've actually brought here my dog's dog lead. Well, it's my wife's dog, actually, and my wife's dog lead for the dog. We went and took the dog for a walk on Friday. And do you know what? This lead is never slack when we take our dog for a walk. It's always like that. Why? Because the dog is constantly trying to push ahead, constantly trying to drive on, trying to go quicker than us as owners really want to go. And sometimes we can be like that with Jesus in the storm, can't we? We're just pulling away, pulling away. Come on, God, catch up with me. Come on, God, catch up with me. Where is the trust? Are we trusting God's schedule? Are we trusting God's agenda? Are we trusting God's timing in what we face? What is God saying to you? Or are we like that snappy little dog just trying to drag God into the situation? When people tried that with God, what did he do? Jesus withdrew. Said, okay, you want to play God? Crack on. You want to make me God rather than let me be God? Crack on. But you do it without me. Let's not make that mistake. Let's not make God God. Let him be God in our lives. Let's trust him. As we think about God's agenda, if you're frustrated, say, God, I'm frustrated. I wish you could go quicker. I wish you could do this. I'm rowing against the wind. But either way, I don't care because I'm trusting you to get in the boat and make a difference, to get me to my destination in your time and in your way. Or perhaps we're disorientated. We're not sure what the future holds. We're not sure where we're going to go. We're not sure about our job, our health, our relationships. But we turn around and say, rather than trying to do something, we're going to say, okay, Jesus, I'm going to trust you to manage all this stuff and get me back on track. Be that anchor in the storm. Or perhaps we're focusing too much on the physical. We're too busy trying to hoard those toilet rolls and the pasta and everything else, and we're not taking time out to connect with the one who can get in the boat and navigate us safely to the port of home. What's your response this week? Jesus is saying, I'm here. I may be here even in supernatural power if you need it. Will you invite me into the boat? If you need any help with that, please do get in touch with us at West Road Church. Either email that, we've got books that can help, literature can help, we've got people who can help you. If you want to invite Jesus into your life during this storm time, or you want some help or prayer, whatever it is, please, you can hit the prayer button if you're online, or just drop us a line and we'd love to follow up with you.